by building the virtues of strength, leadership, wisdom, responsibility, and Christ likeness. Today we're going to speak about what it is to be a man. We're going to be defining what masculinity actually is. And this is an all-important topic because there are a lot of misconceptions about what a man is. And so today we're going to kind of give a nice general idea of what it is to be a man. Ultimately, we're going to be looking at what it is God thinks of men and what he wants men to be, what he created men to be. And it's important that we understand what this is. You might have asked yourself this question at some point in your life. What is it to be a man? You might actually still be asking yourself now, am I really a man? At what point did I become a man? At what point do men become men? And what I want to do today is just kind of give you 5 things that we can look through that will give us a good understanding of what it is to be a man. But before that, I just want to give you a personal story. So I think I was about maybe 18 years old at the point that I started to think of myself as a man. Before then, I used to just get away with being irresponsible. I never really thought much of my life. But when I was about 17 or 18 years old, I really did start to think a little bit more about what it is I wanted to become. I wanted to take responsibility for myself. I wanted to step up and actually be a man. I remember going to my dad and telling him, "Dad, you know what? I don't want to have to be too dependent on you for too long. And so I'm thinking of getting a job and moving out. Forget college for now. I just want to do my best to make it." And that's kind of been how I've always, been. Always wanting to be ambitious, always just trying to strive to be better. And I think at that point I knew I wanted to be a man. But looking back, I can't say that I really felt like I was actually a man. It's only years later as I started to really grow and understand what it really takes to be a man and actually begun to live that out, that I could finally say, yeah, I'm finally a man. I wasn't simply a little boy beating my little chest and calling myself a man when in fact I wasn't. There are things I needed to learn. There are things that we all need to learn in order for us to really be called men. So what are some of these things? The first thing I want to suggest is this. Men are providers. Men provide. That's something God has given us to do. We are called to provide. We're called to provide physically. We're called to provide spiritually. We're called to provide emotionally. And this takes hard work. Being a provider is hard work. It takes having a solid work ethic, understanding that it's up to us. At the end of the day, if something needs to be delivered, it's on us, right? We take responsibility for that. As men, we are called to be providers. Providers for our families, providers for ourselves, providers for our communities. And it's important that we understand this. There are many men who kind of get away with other people doing stuff for them. But as men, if we understand our role as providers, we understand that the buck really falls with us. It really is up to us to make sure that things around us, our responsibilities, are well taken care of. I'm a husband and I'm a father, and it's my responsibility to provide for my wife. My wife at the moment is a student, and she's a mother, she's a wife full-time, and it's an honor for me to be able to provide for her, to provide for her needs, to provide for our son's needs as well, and whatever he needs. And that's a big responsibility. It does take a lot out of me. It takes a lot of me mentally, it takes a lot of me emotionally, it takes a lot of me physically. But that's what God has built us for, and because he's built us for it, he gives us the grace to be able to provide. Ultimately, he's the one who provides for us. But he uses my hard work, he uses my faithfulness in order to do so. So as men, we need to understand that it's our responsibility to be the ones to provide for our families. The next thing is, as men, we're called to be protectors. And that requires strength. I had read from 1 Corinthians chapter 16 and verse 13 in our first episode, and I just want to reiterate what it says. 1 Corinthians 16 verse 13 says, "Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong." I love this verse. I think it really does capture what it is to be a man. And one of the things I really love about what it says is that calling to be strong. As men, we need to be strong for several reasons. But one reason that I'm talking about here is to be protectors. We need to be physically strong in order to protect those that we love. I need to make sure that I'm in pristine condition to take care of my wife and to take care of my son. They need me to do that. If someone's going to break into my home, it's on me to take that guy down. And in order for me to do that, I need to make sure that I am nurturing my ability to protect by nurturing my strength. But this also it's not just physical, it's also emotional. As men, we're called to be emotional protectors. I need to guard and protect my wife emotionally. I need to guard and protect my son emotionally, making sure that they're not they're not harmed emotionally in that sense. Same thing spiritually. I need to be the guy who stands in the gate of my home and making sure that no false or destructive doctrine or ideology enters my home. It's on me to protect my family from those kinds of vices. It's also important for me to be able to protect myself from those vices by enabling myself to be strong spiritually, to be strong emotionally. It's critical that I build that discipline of strength in order to protect those around me. So as men, we're called to be protectors, and we need to take that seriously. And we're just called to be protectors in society in general as well. As men, our biological buildup is designed for us to protect women, to honor all women, to protect the less disadvantaged, to protect all those around us, those we've been given responsibility over. And I think if we can understand what that looks like, we'll be more capable men in society. I think one of the things that feminism and progressive ideology has done is sort of damaged this idea of men being able to protect. And so they shame men and emasculate men, basically weakening them, where men have no ability to protect themselves and to protect others. And ultimately what that does is actually makes women more vulnerable. And as men, we don't have the capacity to protect them. And so it's important that we understand God's command for us to be protectors. God's command for us to be strong in this regard, because society depends on that. Another thing that I like to speak about with regard to manhood is how men are called to be leaders. This basically means that we are conduits of authority. God has given the headship in the family and in the church to men. And it's very important that we take this seriously. We understand what it is to be a leader. And I use the word conduits of authority because we don't define the authority. God does. We simply submit to His authority. And in submitting to His authority, we take authority over those that He has given under us. And He's given us the responsibility as leaders so that we can, once again, provide for others, so that we can protect others, ultimately so that we can build others up for the glory of God ultimately. We need to take our responsibility as leaders very seriously, which means that we should be the ones to lead in love, to lead in doing everything that we're called to do. In my home, everything begins with me. If I'm slacking, my family's going to follow suit. So if I'm a bad leader, my family is not going to be in a good space. In fact, I've often heard it said that every home has a leader. Where a man is, there's a leader. The question is, what kind of leader is he going to be? Your family is always going to follow suit. And so there's a big calling on us to be leaders and to be good leaders, because there are people behind us who are following. Now, a lot of people are intimidated by this idea of leadership and like, I don't want that kind of responsibility. But this is something that God calls us to. This is something that He has built into us. It's our responsibility to understand what that is, to nurture it, and to grow and better ourselves as leaders or conduits of authority. The fourth thing I like to speak about with regard to what it is to be a man is how a man is one who takes responsibility. He takes responsibility for himself. He takes responsibility for others. He takes responsibility for his calling. And this is very critical to understand. And I have alluded to responsibility as we have spoken about this. But it's important to understand that responsibility is a big thing. It means that everything really falls on us. We're not here to make excuses. If we have been assigned something, it's on us to make sure that we are successful in what it is we have been assigned to. We need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, making sure that we're equipping ourselves to be everything that God wants us to be. We're equipping ourselves to do what it is that we're supposed to do and supposed to be as men. That responsibility is on us. If I'm responsible to provide, then I'm responsible to make sure that I have something that will allow me to provide. If my responsibility is to protect, it is my responsibility to make sure that I am equipping myself to protect others, to protect myself. And that's really important. Another thing about responsibility is just, taking responsibility for our calling. God has given us a calling as men, to be watchful, to stand firm in the faith, to act like men, to be strong, to let all that we do be done in love. We're responsible for that. We're responsible to keep watch over others. Although specifically we have responsibility over, we're called to stand firm in the faith. We're responsible for that. When we fall by the wayside, that's no one's fault but ours. We've been given the calling, which means we've been given the grace, and therefore it's on us to simply walk in obedience and become everything that God would have us be. This concept of responsibility cannot be overstated. When I was a young man, still in my teenage years, I used to frown at the idea of responsibility. It felt too big. It felt, I just didn't feel like I was ready, essentially. But as soon as I learned how to take responsibility for things, I was able to grow. I was able to learn from my mistakes. I was able to live with courage, just knowing that because I am responsible, I better make this work. And that really pushed me to be better. It pushed me to grow. And I do not regret it. And I think a lot of men like to put off responsibility for as long as possible. I think when I was 16 years old, I always wished and hoped that I'd get married when I was 21. I didn't. But the point is this: I think that was very foreign at the time. Not many men who even my age really aspire to being husbands or aspire to being fathers, because we don't really like the responsibility. We like all the intimacy, but we don't really like the commitment. We really struggle to commit to things. And responsibility does require us to be people who make commitments. It does demand us to be people who keep our word. And that is a big thing, but that's not something we should run away from. That's something that we should pursue and run toward. It is a privilege to be responsible for yourself. It's a privilege to be responsible for your calling. It's a privilege to be responsible for others. And I think as men, we'd be better off if we actually understood this. And the fifth thing I want to say about what it is to be a man is simply this: a man is one who embraces the art of manliness. I just want to take you back to 1 Corinthians in chapter 16, verse 13, where it says, "Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men." That's the point right there. Act like men. In other words, there is a way that men act. There is a masculine way which we should act. And it's an art. It's an art that needs to be perfected. And if we're going to be the kind of men that God wants us to be, we need to embrace that. We need to embrace the idea that God has called us to be something. And it's on us now to figure out how we can master that art, to master the art of manliness. And I'm really hoping that Ordinary Gentlemen is going to be an initiative that's going to help you do that, to master the art of masculinity by building the virtues of strength, leadership, wisdom, responsibility, and Christ-likeness. That's what we're here to do, to master the art of masculinity. There is a way that God wants us to go as men, and it's important that we understand that way and walk that way faithfully. And this is the thing, is that, in this day and age, the idea of masculinity has kind of been blurred. And that's why you get things like, or you see a lot of effeminacy in men. You see a lot of passivity in men. And that's not something that God has called us to be. Not at all. If we really understand what it is to be men, it's one thing, again, to just look at it and affirm it, but not actually walk in that path. It's important that we are faithful in actually embracing it, running after it, intentionally building ourselves to be men, in every single way. One thing that I like to do just every day is just to exercise a little bit, reminding myself, okay, as a man, I'm called to be strong. I need to make sure that I am intentionally mastering the art of masculinity by building that virtue of strength, physical strength. That means I'm going to get into my Bible every single day in order to nurture my spiritual strength. It means I'm going to try to read a book every day in order to nurture my mental strength, my emotional strength. And that's absolutely critical. And I think as men, if we could just take this seriously, if we could just embrace the art of manliness, oh man, our families would be transformed. Our societies would be transformed. We would be transformed. Ultimately, God would be glorified. And it's really my prayer that each and every one of us can really understand this. Understand our calling as men to be providers, to be protectors, to be leaders, to be people who take responsibility, and to be people who embrace the art of manliness. My good men, let's fight that good fight. Let's take this seriously. Let's live out what it is to be a man. And as always, let us be found faithful rather than wanting.